the long-awaited review is finally here. Let's talk about my thoughts on ArieForce One. What's up guys, Dr. Coaster here and welcome back to another video on the channel, where today we'll be discussing my long-awaited review of ArieForce One, the brand new RMC coaster located at Spot Atlanta in Fayetteville, Georgia. Before we barrel roll our way into this review, if you haven't already, then be sure to drop the video a like, as it helps me fight the YouTube algorithm. While you're at it, subscribe to the channel as well for more roller coaster and theme park content just like this. At the time of writing this review, I've ridden ArieForce One over 100 times, so I think I've got a pretty accurate account of what it brings to the table. ArieForce One opened to the public on March 31st, 2022 after extensive delays due to local government issues. Regardless, this coaster was definitely worth the wait, and it delivered across every 3,400 feet of track it has to offer. I was fortunate enough to attend a VIP event the night before opening day, so I was able to see everyone's first reactions to the ride the following day. Things that I heard from enthusiasts and members of the general public alike included, but weren't limited to, this is the best coaster in Georgia. This might be the best RMC. Six Flags ain't got nothing on this. And I can't believe how great this ride is. What is it doing here? With testimonials like that, you already know that the Arie family and FunSpot have got a winner on their hands. I can also say with confidence that this isn't the last time that you will see RMC and FunSpot working together. They are about to make even more noise in the coming years, and it won't be limited to just this park. Without further ado, let's get into this much anticipated review of the ride. I lost count of how many times I was asked during opening weekend when it would be coming, so here it is. I've watched this coaster come up from the ground for over a year now, and it's finally time to give this review. So let's go ahead and start with the theme surrounding the ride itself. As many already know, the theme of ArieForce One revolves around the concept of aviation with a heavy emphasis on space travel. So much so that the special guest at opening day was none other than astronaut Colonel Doug Hurley, the pilot of the final space shuttle mission and the first ever SpaceX flight. I'm still in shock that I rode this coaster with a freaking astronaut. But anyways, this ride was inspired by John Arie Sr.'s fascination with aviation from a young age. For those of you that don't know, John Arie Sr. founded FunSpot America before retiring and selling the company to his son, John Arie Jr., who is now the CEO of the company. Naming this coaster meant a lot to the family, and I don't believe they could have executed the theming any better. Many will recall that this was originally supposed to be themed to Atlanta sports franchise. Now, I'm pretty sure that was the Hawks, but it ended up falling through. However, I don't think it could have worked out any better than it has now. Upon arriving at the park, you immediately realize that the station is themed to a hangar, but you can't see much in it until you actually enter the building itself. The station building is 2 floors and you enter on the ground floor, which many were surprised to see was pretty elaborately themed and unlike anything FunSpot had ever done before. The best comparison I can give, and that I heard others saying throughout the weekend as well, is this ride compares similar to Orion at Kings Island with the station and the theming. A little known fact is that the theming on the ground floor is all repurposed and recycled materials that were once used at the park. One of the first theming elements that you see is an office with a whiteboard and blueprints for a space mission. On the whiteboard, you can also see where Colonel Hurley and John Arie Jr. signed the board on opening day. The surrounding area also features a lot of barrels, pipes, banners, and tubes. The red tubes seen here were actually once part of the playpen that used to exist at the park, and many riders once actually crawled through these, including myself. Not to be outdone by the ground floor, once ascending the stairs, riders are greeted by a station adorned by even more banners displaying facts about the ride. There's also a themed control booth and a themed ride monitor that displays the status of each seat. Those that have ridden coasters in the SeaWorld chain are very familiar with this. What sets this screen apart, however, is it is themed like the panel of a spacecraft. It's awesome to see in person, but something that's even more interesting is that this portion of the screen displays names of those influential to the ride. You can only read them when zoomed in on camera, as this is an Easter egg, but they include the names of FunSpot and RMC employees, and even Scott and Jack from Upstart Media. It's a pretty cool added touch. Once the air gates open, you'll notice the overhead sound effects indicating a launch sequence that are synced to the gates opening, harnesses locking, and the trains both entering and exiting the station. FunSpot really went above and beyond theming this ride, but the theming is only the appetizer. Now let's talk about the layout and ride experience itself. ArieForce One wastes no time at all getting the ride started with a drop immediately out of the station and into a pre-lift section. This section hits surprisingly hard in the back of the train, and the front gets progressively more aggressive as the ride warms up throughout the day. The drop followed by 2 bunny hills really start off the ride well, but this is also nothing new on an RMC. Next up is the 154-foot tall chain lift hill. Obviously, nothing too special here. However, you get a great view of the city of Atlanta from the top of it, and if you ride later in the day around golden hour, you can watch the shadow of the train climb the lift and all the way down the first drop. I would highly recommend watching that to anybody riding during sunset. It's incredible to see. The first drop performs just as expected. If you're familiar with RMC coasters, you already know that you're going to get launched in the back row and the front row won't hit quite as hard. However, that's pretty much where the comparisons between front and back rows stops with this ride. ArieForce One hits hard in every row from here on out. The first drop is only 146 feet tall at an angle of 83 degrees, but it doesn't feel that way at all. You haul over that first drop and pull some serious positive G's before you fly up into the world's first Rave and Trust dive. This element is one that many people were super curious about, including myself, and it delivered better than I could have ever imagined. That outward pop just before you enter the dive towards the ground brings you out of your seat, and you don't touch it again until you're already at the bottom of this element. It also flings you forward in the process of all of this, increasing the insanity of this element. Combine that with the head and hand choppers of diving through the truss structure, and you've got a wild element that I think will be making more appearances on future ground-up RMC coasters. Then there's the speed hill, that you take at an absolutely breakneck pace. This airtime hill is an absolute thigh bruiser and takes you by total surprise if you don't know what's coming. Many riders are focused on the 0G stall coming up ahead before getting absolutely launched up into the restraints. This is probably the most slept on element of the ride leading up to opening day, and it absolutely delivered beyond what anybody thought it would. Losing barely any speed, ArieForce One rockets us up into the longest 0G stall in North America immediately after the speed hill, and you can feel every second of this stall. On a cool morning, that stall lasted probably 3 seconds long, if not longer. We were having full-on conversations during it and playing rock, paper, scissors throughout the weekend. Now, if you want to get really crazy on this ride, try playing a 4-round tournament of rock, paper, scissors on every inversion. Absolute madness, especially if you play with somebody in front or behind you. Even later in the day, as the ride warms up, this stall still performs incredibly. The last thing to note about the stall, before we move on to the Outer Banked Airtime Hill, is the entrance and exit of this element, because they are steep, and the exit provides for excellent speed into the Outer Banked Airtime Hill. I've stated repeatedly that I don't have a favorite element on this ride, but if I was forced to pick one, it would likely be this one. The Outer Banked Airtime Hill is the element that Joe Draves designed this entire ride around, and after experiencing it, I totally understand why. This element feels like it's never going to end as you fly over the station completely out of your seat. RMC has done several Outer Banked Airtime Hills, but never one at this type of an angle. It might look small compared to the ones on Steel Vengeance and Iron Gwazi, but I can say with 100% confidence that it performs just as well, if not better. This is the standout airtime moment on the ride, without question. Not to be outdone too far by the Outer Banked Airtime Hill is the double up. If there was one element that shocked me the most, it was definitely this one. I was not expecting the amount of airtime that I got cresting over the second hill. The first hill provides a sharp pop of ejector before you go completely airborne for a couple of seconds on the second hill. I just love flailing my arms and ragdolling my body on both this second hill and the Outer Banked Airtime Hill. From listening to what others were saying throughout the weekend, it seemed like this element took many others by surprise as well. It doesn't look that steep, but the way it's profiled and the speed at which you take it turn this thing into a complete beast. Before you can even catch your breath, it's time to get spun through the barrel roll. I still can't wrap my mind around this one, and it was initially supposed to be even more insane. I had the ability to talk to RMC throughout the weekend, and their initial pitch to the fun spot was for the barrel roll to actually go through the arcade in an acrylic tube, rather than passing over the building like it is now. I would have loved to have seen that, but for making things a little easier on construction and dealing with less bureaucracy, I totally understand why they went with it the way that it is now. The barrel roll's best comparison is definitely the Mosasaurus roll and Velocicoaster. They feel pretty similar, but this one is definitely a bit more snappy than its Florida relative. And if you thought the clearance on the Raven truss dive was close, look at the clearance on this thing. Once you're done rotating one way through the barrel roll, it's time to get flung in the opposite direction immediately afterwards with the fakie airtime hill. I'm still not exactly sure why this element is called the fakie airtime hill, because there is nothing fake about it whatsoever. This is a straight ejector moment that flings you up and to the left. This is probably the one element on the ride that is definitely better on one side versus the other, because you get flung a lot harder on the right side of the train here. But there aren't many moments like that on the ride whatsoever. Every seat is incredible. This hill and the speed hill after the truss dive are probably the two most rapid fire moments on the ride. Now that you've experienced a ton of negative G's up to this point, it's time for the ground hugger. This supposedly pulls 3.75 positive G's, but it felt like more. This may have felt that way because I rode it over 100 times, but the general consensus throughout the weekend was that ArieForce One was flying quicker than it was expected to. This is definitely a gray out moment on the ride for some people as ArieForce One rips through this helix before its final inversion. Speaking of that final inversion, this final 0G roll doesn't even seem like it should be there, but I'm so happy it is. This thing was definitely squeezed in to make this ride just that much more crazy. It doesn't feel as snappy as the barrel roll, but isn't taken head on like the barrel roll either. This feels more like the typical RMC 0G rolls that we were used to, but a lot closer to the ground to set up the final sequence on the ride. Starting with the chili dip and ending with the final pop into the brakes, ArieForce One ends with one of the most violent airtime finales ever seen. I'm just going to go ahead and throw out the term quad down because that isn't what this ending is whatsoever. This ride strings together not 4, not 5, but 6 ridiculously aggressive airtime moments to end the ride. In the back, this thing is almost too much to handle, especially later in the day. As this ride warms up throughout the day, this sequence of elements is the most relentless on the entire ride, which is hilarious because I think it got ridden off by a lot of people following the initial animation. What a way to end the ride. Wow. I can't even imagine what this coaster is going to be riding like in the heat of a Georgia summer. ArieForce One is the best coaster in the state of Georgia, and I have no reservations in saying that at all. It is also located the best park in the state in my opinion. Another popular talking point throughout the weekend was how welcoming and kind the staff were at Fun Spot compared to Six Flags Over Georgia. They were also consistently operating their rides at full capacity. Many people I know went to Six Flags Over Georgia on Saturday, the day after opening day, and left the park to come back to Fun Spot instead because of how poor the customer experience was at Six Flags. It's only a matter of time before Six Flags is forced to take notice of Fun Spot and the 116 acres of land that they have at their disposal. If ArieForce One is just the beginning, imagine what is coming in the future. RMC and Fun Spot just created one of the greatest coasters ever built, and to no one's surprise, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. Thank you all for watching. That was my in-depth review of ArieForce One, the ground-up RMC coaster located at Fun Spot Atlanta. Have you ridden ArieForce One? Let me know in the comments below, as well as what you thought of it. Need to vent on my review in this video? Then be sure to do that as well. If you haven't already, then be sure to drop the video a like and subscribe to the channel as well for more roller coaster and theme park content just like this. If you want to follow me on Instagram as well, then you can find me there at Dr_Coaster. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.